Going live, going live, going live. Hi, this is Jason. Welcome to Founder of the Day. Today we are going to talk about the road to the Constitution's ratification. But first, I learned the other day that when I do a live stream, I have to make it public. But this little bit is for people who are watching after the fact. So, welcome to behind the scenes while I refresh my screen and hope it appears. If you want, it's 5 o'clock now. If you skip ahead to just a minute, okay. Live discussion of the ratification of the Constitution. We're going to put in American Revolution. Trying to add tags to get people to join us. Revolutionary War, founders, founding fathers, founder of the day. Okay, can I edit this? Ratification of the Constitution. Let's see, live stream. Founder of the day live stream. And let's go live playlist. And public. Done. Okay, I apologize for that. Let's hit save, and we're off. Great, thank you for your patience. We will refresh this and see how it goes. Hi, welcome to Founder of the Day. For those of you joining us just now, I'm only 1 minute late this week. I hope this is working. Yes, Founder of the Day live stream. We are on. Hi. Hopefully someone will join us shortly since I just went live. Today, just to give you a heads up, we are going to be discussing the process of ratification of the United States Constitution. I am new. This is my second live stream, so I'm not entirely sure how the process works still. Let's go to other features. Live control room, that's a thing. Why don't we take a look? Great. Thank you for your patience while I figure this out. Streaming status good. The health is good. Total viewers 0. Great. Well, again, I don't want to waste too much time because I understand there will be people who watch it later on because not everyone is free at 5 o'clock on a Saturday. I am clearly not great at live streaming. We're live for 3 minutes, which means, yes, okay. Great. Live control room. Okay. Well, there's still no one here, but I don't want to waste too much time. I'm going to go for about a half an hour today. Last week we spoke about some of my books, which I hope you go back and check that out because I made recommendations of all of these wonderful texts. So I am going to get into it because presumably no one will join us because this is a fairly unknown channel. So we're going to start with the United States Constitution itself. The Constitutional Convention met through the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia, and they, of course, created the government that we still have for the United States. And the signing of the Constitution was on September 17th, 1787, Constitution Day. In the Constitution itself, it discusses the process of ratification because, they didn't really want to just show up and say, hey, this is your new government, deal with it. They wanted to make it at least somewhat, if not democratic, at least Republican. And the process of ratification is, if you don't know, they sent it out to all the different states, and the people were supposed to elect representatives to go to state conventions to discuss the Constitution and either ratify it or not. and send that information out to, actually, I believe, I'm sorry, let me pause. Message. Hi. I'm going to do this because I think that will delete the black. There might have been black on this side of the screen, and hopefully it's gone now. Anyway, so the founders went to Philadelphia, signed the Constitution, sent it out for ratification by the states. The states all reviewed it. Hi. Oh, there is... oh, that's me. That's me sending it. Got it. I'm learning. Thank you for your patience. This says, anyway, the Constitution goes out to the states. The people elect representatives to go to state conventions. They all meet, and in the end, we know now they all ratify it, but at the time, they didn't necessarily all want it, and we will go over that. The goal was to get 9 states to ratify the Constitution. Once 9 states ratified, whammy. New Constitution, new government. And the other 4 would presumably join at some point. So, less than 3 months go by, and on December 7th, 1787, Delaware becomes the first state to ratify the Constitution. And they do what many early states did. Constitution goes undefeated. 34-0 against. And Delaware to this day likes to promote that they are the first state, because they were the first state to join the Union. Interesting, Delaware is one of the small states, and during the Constitutional Convention itself, there was, of course, the Great Compromise, which brought in several... it ended with the government we have today, where the Senate at the time was elected by the states, and each state got 2 senators, and the House of Representatives was elected by population, and each state got whatever amount of representatives based on how many people lived in the state, of course. Interestingly, that was the argument at the time during the convention was big state, the bigger, more populated states wanted everything based on population, and the smaller states wanted everything to be equal. It seems that a lot of the smaller and middle-sized states felt like they won out on the Constitution, because we see a lot of smaller and medium-sized states joining right off the bat. Again, Delaware is the first. They go 30-0 real quick, less than 3 months later. 5 days after that, Pennsylvania ratifies the Constitution. Now, their vote was a little closer. They had, their vote was 46-23, so about a third of the people representing the states were against it. That being said, Pennsylvania was one of the 3 most populated states at the time. Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Virginia were really necessary for the Constitution to be passed and accepted. So Pennsylvania jumping in so early definitely was a win for the Federalists who wanted the Constitution to happen. And then just 6 days after that, New Jersey approves the ratifies the Constitution, again undefeated, 38-0. So very quickly we have 3 middle states all touching each other, saying, okay, yeah, let's come together, because we don't want to be in the middle of all these new states and have them doing whatever they want around us. And other than Pennsylvania, the other 2, Jersey at the time was one of the medium-sized states, and they were great. Okay, so 3 months after the Declaration, 3 months and 1 day after the Constitution is signed, here we go. We have the 3 states have already joined the fray. Excuse me. So another week goes by, and Georgia surprisingly shows up and approves the Constitution. Again, undefeated, 26-4-0 against. Now this is the last time we would have a state be 100% in with their representatives on the Constitution. But Georgia, even though it's all the way in the South, was actually one of the smaller states. One of the smallest states by population at the time. Way bigger than it was now by territory, at least in their opinion. But by population, it's interesting, Georgia only became a colony, it was only founded in 1734, I believe. So about 40 years before the Constitution, before the Revolution, and about 50 years before the ratification process. So they were by far the youngest state, and had one of the smallest populations. So much like these other states that were smaller in population and smaller in general, who said, yeah, like, okay, this is the best we're going to get, Georgia seemed to have that same attitude. So a week after this, just about 3.5 months after the Constitution was signed, Connecticut votes. Now, Connecticut immediately passes the Constitution, but they had a much larger meeting than any of the states we've come across so far. They had 168 people in a room voting for the Constitution. It was a pretty heavy victory, 128 to 40. It's a pretty serious victory, and they become the 5th state to ratify. So the Constitution only needs 9 states to be official, and here we are, less than 4 months, 3.5 months after its signing, and they've already got 5 out of 9. So it's off to a pretty solid start. But then things start to slow down. Some of these other states start to take a lot of time with the ratification. So an entire month goes by before the next state has a vote, and that state is Massachusetts. Now, again, like I said earlier, Massachusetts is one of the 3 most populated states. It's one of the 3 most important states in this fledgling union. If Massachusetts doesn't ratify the Constitution, even if it gets passed, it will probably fall apart. So, Massachusetts has their vote. They have, I'm doing math in my head very quickly, over 300, 320, 340 people in a room. 340 people in a room voting. And out of 300, I should do the math, 355, I think. I did the math quick. Out of 355 people, Massachusetts ratifies the Constitution by 19 votes. Think about that. It means if 10 of these 355 people decide not to support the Constitution, then there is no U.S. government. And luckily on the floor, enough persuasive arguments were made by enough persuasive people to get the just enough delegates to ratify the Constitution. And then things stop for a month and a half. So, yeah. So, we are just over 4 months at this point. When Massachusetts ratifies, just over 4 months after the signing of the Constitution, and we have 6 of 9 states. But things slow down. It wouldn't actually be until almost 3 months later that another convention votes. But before that, in March of 1788, Rhode Island does something peculiar. Now, Rhode Island likes just being its own thing, just tiny Rhode Island, which is the same size today that it was at that point. They didn't actually send a delegate to the Constitutional Convention at all. One of the reasons for the Constitutional Convention is there were certain states who were not doing their part, not sending the funds they needed, not even showing up to the Continental Congress, and unfortunately Rhode Island was one of these major problems. Oh, hi, someone just joined us. Welcome. Whoever just showed up, thank you for coming. We are talking about the ratification of the Constitution. We have just gotten through February. To catch you up very quickly, February of 1788, about 5 months after the signing of the Constitution, we have Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. 6 out of the needed 9 states have already ratified. And we've caught you up to March 1788, where Rhode Island, who did not send anyone to the Constitutional Convention, apparently decided, hey, even though the Constitution says it needs to be ratified by convention, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to have a referendum. So basically, we're going to have the eligible voters vote on whether or not we should have a constitution. So, first of all, even if they voted for it, it wouldn't count. And second of all, they did not vote for it. They are the first state to say no thank you to the Constitution. And on March 24th, 1788, they have a referendum that votes 237 people for the Constitution, 2,708 against. That's right. 200 people liked it. 2,700 didn't. And they're like, sorry, no union for us. And then time passes. And it isn't until late April, April 28th of 1788, that another state even votes. And that state is Maryland. Maryland, as we've discussed some of the smaller states from earlier who voted very quickly, Maryland's one of these smaller states, and they seem to think, yeah, this is going to be the best for us. We're not going to get anything better out of this. And they vote 63 for 11 against. And they pass pretty easily. So now we're up to 7 states. We only need 2 more. But as the late spring comes and the weather's nicer and easier to travel, some of the states with bigger geographic territory finally start to have their meetings. And then May 23rd, South Carolina has their vote. And again, they're one of the bigger conventions. They have 222 people. 222? It's a nice number. They have 222 people get in a room, and they actually approve the Constitution fairly quickly. 149 for and 73 against. Great. We have 8. 8 out of 9 states. So, who comes next? Who gets to be the state that pushes the Constitution over the edge and go from this idea we have to the new government? That state ends up being New Hampshire. So, great job, New Hampshire. And in June 21st, they ratify the Constitution 57-47. Again, that's only a 10-vote swing. It's pretty close. Much like Massachusetts and their 350 or so people only ratified by 19, New Hampshire only ratifies by 10. Although it's a smaller room, they seem divided, but they do pass it. Now, just 4 days later, we have the third of the 3 biggest, most important states show up, and that is Virginia. Virginia is, at this time, the most important state in the Union. It is the wealthiest. It has the most people, one of the physically largest, because at the time, West Virginia was still part of it, and they had only just had the Northwest Ordinance where they ceded some land and things like that, but Virginia has their meeting. They, compared to some of the smaller states, they only have 170... I should have done this math ahead of time. They only have about 160 people there, 170 people. Only. But Virginia is divided, famously. So they do pass it, and they become the 10th state in the Union, but their vote is 89-79. That's not a big percentage. It's only, again, like several other states, it's only 10 votes. Which means if 6 Virginians at that meeting did not support the Constitution, and mind you, some very important people changed their mind at the last minute, but if they did not support this, they would not have joined the Union. And without Virginia, the chances of the Union being around today, the Constitution still being the government, are extraordinarily small. Things have changed, Civil War, blah, blah, blah. Centuries have elapsed. But, things could have fallen apart very quickly. Now, after this, so we've got 10, and a month later, New York has a vote. Now, New York, at the time, was a middle-sized state. When it comes to population, even to geographically, they were actually a middle-sized state, though their population was quickly growing. And because about this time, the Bank of New York was starting, and New York was just starting to be a center of industry, so everyone saw New York growing in population, but it hadn't yet. But James Madison Alexander Hamilton thought New York was so important that they wrote the Federalist Papers were all published in New York for New Yorkers. They would eventually make their way around to other states, and of course to us today. But at the time, it was very specifically to the people of New York is how they were started. Almost all of them, maybe all of them. There's 85 of them, so I'm not entirely sure if it's all of them. But they were all written there for that reason. New York gets together, and compared to some of these other states with lots of people, New York only has 57 people in the room. And they vote. and they do approve the Constitution by 3 votes, 30 to 27. So again, it's another vote that's so close. They all seem to go for the Constitution. Well, not all, but they all go for the Constitution, but they're all very, very close. The idea that we unite into one country was not necessarily a popular one, and which is very difficult for us to believe living today, but that's the truth. Truth hurts. Another week goes by, and North Carolina meets. Now, North Carolina had a lot of anti-federalists because they were, at the time, one of the more populated states and one of the wealthier states, and they saw a lot of potential in themselves, which I understand. But they met and they had a vote, but their vote wasn't for the Constitution, nor was it against the Constitution. Their vote was to adjourn, hard word to say, to adjourn without considering the Constitution. And they overwhelmingly, they had over 200, almost 250 people in the room, and they voted overwhelmingly 185 to 84 to adjourn and not even talk about the Constitution. And they left, and that was that. Now, that was in August of 1788, almost a full year, 11 months or so since the signing of the Constitution. But it had already been passed. They already had 11 states now with New York, so Constitution was going to happen. So what did they do? Well, the following March, they go and they set everything up. They get, March 1789, George Washington becomes president. Delegates from 11 states, so 22 people are in the United States Senate. The House of Representatives, very much smaller than it is today. And little Rhode Island and big old North Carolina are just left out. So the writing's on the wall, at least for North Carolina, who the following November 1789, so more than 6 months after the government starts up, George Washington's president for 6 months, and then North Carolina finally has another meeting. They're like, ugh, fine. And they vote, again, there's almost 250 people here, and they vote 194 to 77 to approve the Constitution, because the writing's on the wall. And they go, and then they send some representatives, and they join the government. Everything's honky-dory. All right, welcome aboard. We're not going to hold any grudges. Come on board. And then another 6 months go by, and it's May of 1789. I'm sorry, May of 1790. Washington has been president for more than a year. And little Rhode Island says, all right, let's have our constitutional convention, our ratifying convention. Maybe we should take this seriously. So what do? They show up, and they chit-chat, and they have a vote. There are 66 people in the room. And they vote 34 to 32 in favor of the Constitution. Which, to put in perspective, a year after George Washington is already president, Rhode Island is the only independent country, because before the Constitution, each state considered themselves just that, an independent state. They were their own nations. The Articles of Confederation were a league of friendship, as they called it. They had a really, really, really high-level peace treaty, sharing armies and stuff. But they were their own countries in many people's minds. I would not have said, I'm from the United States, I'm an American. I would have said, I'm a New Yorker. You might have said, you're a Connecticutian? Connecticut? Okay, Connecticut was a bad example. I'm a Virginian. I'm a New Hampshireite. Just realizing how little of the states I know what people call themselves. But the point is the same. You wouldn't consider yourself an American. You'd consider yourself from your state. And Rhode Islanders were very much in that camp. So, a year after Washington's president, Rhode Island meets, and they basically win by one person. If one person votes against the Constitution, then it's tied 33-33, and Rhode Island's just not a part of it. Now, unlike someone like Virginia or Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, who were necessary for the Constitution to work, Rhode Island kind of, this sounds very mean. I like Rhode Island, but they weren't really that important. The ports at Portsmouth and such were important, the whaling industry, things like that, but not important to the nation as a whole, like certain other cities and states were. You know, it's interesting to think about how long would Rhode Island have made it as their own independent country before the United States were just like, it's now or never. like, do you think eventually under Eisenhower we would have just invaded Rhode Island? It's a tough question, but in summation, I think we're almost done here. It's approaching 5:30. I didn't want to keep you too long. But just to run back through, 3 months after the Constitution signed, you get, I'll say 4 months after the Constitution signed, you get Delaware, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, and Massachusetts all joining the Union, with only Massachusetts putting up any kind of argument. Everyone else comes in quick. A little bit after that, Rhode Island just has the referendum, doesn't care. And then Maryland, South Carolina, New Hampshire, and Virginia coming over the next few months, with New Hampshire and Virginia having close votes. After that, New York, one of the last holdouts. Again, 3 votes for New York to join the Union. Could have easily, 2 people could have swayed New York out of it. And New York was a hotbed of anti-federalism, and would remain what we would consider today a swing state for decades. You look at like that. George Clinton is governor for a very long time, and then he only loses to John Jay, who's a Federalist. He's the first Supreme Court justice. He travels internationally to Europe, and then he goes back to Clinton for a little bit, who ends up being a Democratic Republican, Jefferson's second vice president, and Madison's vice president for a while. And then of course North Carolina, 6 months after Washington's president, says, okay, fine. And then a year plus after Washington's president, Rhode Island's finally like, fine, but they're not happy about it. For those of you watching, if you have any questions, feel free to type it in now. I'd be happy to answer anything about this or any subject. I'll give you a minute to think of something fun. And while we wait, I will just say, this is a really interesting learning experience for me. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please like, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. But if you like, it helps more people see it. I'm just trying to make this as accessible to everyone as I can and build a community around the American Revolution. Because I'm not sure why, but YouTube and the internet has a lot about the American Revolution. That's a bold statement, but YouTube really doesn't have a lot going on about the Revolution, so, I know a lot about it. I'm seizing the opportunity, trying to build something for everyone. I don't see anyone with any questions, so I will just say thank you for watching again. Go to my website, www.founderoftheday.com, where I write daily articles on the American Revolution, and search for someone random that you think he couldn't possibly have written about this person. I think you'd be surprised. In a year and a half and 600 articles in, I've covered a lot of founders that don't get a lot of love on most of the internet. Although I've covered a lot of people who do get quite some love. Yeah, so that's that. I came up with a sign-off last week. I can't remember what it was, but so I'm just going to make up something different every time until I fall on something I like. Hopefully, pokely. I don't know. I'm Jason. Thank you for watching. Leave a comment if you have any questions in the future. Bye now. Off. Nope, didn't work. Stop.